So I'm always really happy if I can facilitate this course. We first take a quick look into the course as it is online. So the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're gonna together explore this course, Homegrown, a manual to practice place-based education. And you see here that we actually have, I go on dashboard, a few more participants than just us. Tanya, our permaculture practitioner from Zurich, has actually joined, but I guess she will definitely want to watch the recording. And I don't know actually who is Sona. Was this one of the ESC volunteers? I don't recall the name. Okay. Before we start with the course itself, just some housekeeping things to know. Here in the public page of the course, you all notice already we have this chat function. Yeah. So this is basically our chat group to share information, to ask questions, to do peer learning, whatever you want. And of course, you can also make posts. Yeah. So if there are any assignments that need to be kind of viewed with pictures, then that's the place to post. But apart from this, we have this chat, and I actually didn't know that we have two dislocated participants. So I shared the Zoom link too late, but now it's there. I will also share the recordings here. Good. I think that's enough in regard to this. We all know each other, so I think there is no need for introduction, right? But we will quickly jump into the course to introduce the course. You see, Mary, if you actually see my screen now, I have this symbol swap displays. Do you see it here in the top? Mm-hmm. That's what I didn't find on your thing. And if I press this, then it just swaps the displays and I have the full screen slide to show. Okay, so I will locate our our videos somewhere to find a place that is meaningful. What do you think? Maybe right now it's actually good on the side. Sometimes I will click it away if I need the entire screen. Okay, and you can also remind me. Good. So a little bit to the background. The course has evolved actually out of the Montessori training that I took all of 2018, and then I implemented it first in 2019, and since then already 3, 4, 5, 6 times. But it's a work in progress. Yeah. So what are we gonna go into? We're gonna go in about 50 hours, about 25 hours of interactive instruction and 25 hours of assignments. We're gonna go through these 10 chapters, sessions. We're gonna look into education systems in general to also understand why education needs to change. We're gonna dive into place-based learning, about which at least you have heard already a lot. We're gonna talk about bioregional education. I think for our group, what will be newer and more interesting is Montessori method, practical life, sensorial education. I usually go in the course to the local natural history museum. We've done that already, so we'll skip it. But Adri, I think especially for you, important to remember, the next time we facilitate this course, you will be co-facilitator, and we go there definitely again. Then 1 to 2 weeks, you will have to design your own activities and try them. Then we have one session on the functionality of the Green Steps arc, which is also not really something that you need to learn anymore, but we still need to go through this to have a recording. And the last week is an activity sharing where we peer review what you have produced. Okay? Any questions? No. Good. Then also about course housekeeping. All the course material I will continuously fill into a cloud folder that you find here. So today you will find, for example, this presentation there, and you can download everything, yeah, and hopefully use it also afterwards. There will be a couple of assignments. Central to the course are 3 activities that you should be designing. One is a practical life activity that you need to design, try, and create the best practice out of it. The second is a sensorial education activity that you also need to design, try, and then create the best practice out of it. You should do every week a post on the ARC. Do it wherever you want. If you think it's related to the course, then do it in the course. If you think it's something that can be shared, then make it public. You will get, we're gonna have quite a few of videos that are brilliant, so I have no need that I talk about it. And you will have a few assignments to write a little essay, very short, about some of those talks. Mostly it's TED Talks. We might have to do some nature journal entries, and then there is a course feedback form at the end. And you get the badge that you see on the right side right after your best practices have been created and reviewed. That's it? Yeah? Yeah. All right. So then let me jump into the next slide deck. So nobody else has joined yet. I'll quickly look into the chat. Also here, nobody has replied. So I guess they will wait for the recording. Good. Back to Zoom, everything prepared. So before we go into this main part of session 1 on education systems, what are your expectations? I mean, you saw the course overview. Is there anything that you expect? I mean, Mary, Adri, you two are biologists. Liuba, you are psychologist, musician. So education, we all went through education, but you don't look at it from a professional perspective. What would you expect when we talk about education systems? Or what is it that you think you might be interested or you want to know about education systems? Always kind of interesting for me too.
I would say, since I don't really have much of a background in this.
Speak up a little bit because of the speaker.
For me, I would say that since I don't really have much of a background in this topic, because of course I study biology and not really much about education, I would expect to expand my horizons in this regard, and maybe, for example, learn the difference between different educational systems, but in a deep level, in a deep manner, I would say, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can I just follow-up question?
Mhm.
What different education systems are you pointing at? Can you name them?
I would say, I mean, in this case, for example, comparing maybe place-based education and for example, I don't know, typical education at schools in the classroom with nothing organized on the outdoors. I don't know exactly different names or of different systems, but I guess they're quite a nice, well, an important range of differences.
Okay.
I would say.
Yeah. Anything else?
I can say, I mean, I have experience in education and teaching.
You also have to speak up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Even though I have experience in education, teaching music and English, for me, it's a good way to practice and experience creating and implementing of activities connected with nature, and yeah, learn more about that, and also think about how it can be connected with yeah, the teaching that I did or will continue doing after the project. So how it can be implemented in other areas of areas of teaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing? Mary? Nothing? All right. Good. Then let's start. So I start with a rather dark picture, of course. Not everything about education is dark, but I would like to start with a quote from the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, who is best known for his philosophy of dialogue. And he said that the real struggle is not between East and West or capitalism and communism. I think it's quite interesting also nowadays again, but between education and propaganda. So
we are seeing the notes.
Are you seeing the notes now? Ah, thank you. Then why is that? Should be different. No, always please. This is important. So let me try this again. So how is it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you for pointing this out. So I start over again. I picked this quote from Martin Buber, who was a Jewish philosopher, and he is mainly known for the philosophy of dialogue. Interesting also, no? Teacher-student dialogue means that you are sort of on the same level, you learn from each other. And he said the struggle is not between East and West or capitalism and communism, but between education and propaganda. So Buber sharply points at the power of language to actually obscure truth. Words we use quite often as labels on containers of meaning, and quite often we are deceived by the label, believing in a certain content, when in reality we are duped into taking the same for something different or something entirely different for the same. So Buber essentially asks for a truthful education, an education which is not wielded by regimes, an education that is not wielded by corporations as propaganda to oppress people, but an education which empowers and enlightens. So I think it's quite clear what he means now. And this is, of course, why this picture is very negative. So if we look into words, words can be quite often very enlightening. And so we first look into the word education. Words are often labels, no? They help us to talk, to speak, to put quite often something very complex into a few letters. So they describe a container of meaning. The words which date back to the Greco-Roman roots often have changed their meaning. Whatever we understand under the label now might be completely different from what was once meant or what was once inside that container. So let's take a look at education. Education, first column, is a word which emerged with the scientific revolution in the 16th century. You see this here on the bottom. Origin, mid-16th century, from Latin education, from the verb educare. So one might ask, why did it emerge so late? No, 16th century. And it really is, it is connected to the scientific revolution, because then it was possible to standardize education. This was really the start. Technology, power politics, all this started with the scientific revolution and then merged into the industrial revolution. And Adri, I asked about what kind of systems do we look at? We mostly look at the industrial education system, which is super standardized and also highly criticized for this matter. So this is already interesting that the term education as a word emerged in the 16th century. If we continue to look into the word educate, this word merged or comes from the late Middle English. Middle English was spoken or written from the 11th to the 15th century, so before the scientific revolution. And of course, we can observe this with some cynicism, that nowadays only one meaning is really understood under education, no? Or educate. So 1A, to provide schooling for. If I'm a parent, I provide schooling to my children if I have to pay tuition. If I'm the government, I provide schooling to all children in a state. 1B, to train by formal instruction and supervised practice, especially in a skill, trade, or profession. 2A, to develop mentally, morally, or aesthetically, especially by instruction. 2B, to provide with information. And then 3, I think this is the interesting one that I want to highlight, to persuade or condition to feel, believe, or act in a desired way. So I think education actually had originally a very positive meaning, but mostly today we understand under educate the meaning number 3. So students, no matter where they are from, they are educated in a desired way. But we also see here that late Middle English absorbed a lot of Latin words, and the verb comes also from the root educare, and it's related to the Latin educere, to lead out. And here again, it has the same root as another English word, which is educe, educe. And that's the third column here. Educe is to bring out or develop something latent or potential. And there's another meaning, to infer something from data. It also has its origin in late Middle English, so before the scientific revolution, and it also has the root educere, to lead out. Yeah, so whoever had Latin, the E is a short for X, out of something, and the ducere is to lead. So this is really interesting because we can again ask whoever came up with this word in Latin, no? And those people were usually deep thinkers back then. They thought, okay, somebody needs to be led out of something. So what is this? Where are children or people that are educated to be led out from? And I don't know, you want to have a guess? I also made some guesses. What is coming to your mind, maybe intuitively?
Not sure how to say it in English, but maybe from not knowing to knowing, from not understanding to understanding.
Yeah, why not? From not knowing to knowing, from not understanding to understanding. Anything else that comes to your mind? We talk here really about like the deep purpose of education, no?
It can also have something to do with morals, so educating children
Values.
to be good citizens, for example.
Yeah, I completely agree. Can be about morals. Yeah, so to shape somebody in a good human being. Yeah. Any other ideas? Otherwise, I continue a little bit with what I have collected. Yeah. So I mean, what immediately comes to my mind is to lead somebody out of darkness into light. You know? We talk about the periods of enlightenment in human evolution, and I think it's quite clear that you want to lead by instilling knowledge, wisdom, somebody into enlightenment. I think this is the modern but very truthful idea of education, that you lead as a teacher somebody towards enlightenment. But maybe on a more practical level, and here I think we can make the first connection to place-based education, is that you lead somebody from childhood into adolescence and adulthood. So in indigenous cultures, there was always the concept of elders, and elders have the function to instill into adolescent and children that certain practices and a self-understanding that makes them capable adults. So it has to do here already also something with human development. Yeah, and I think it's important to really think about this, because whenever you ask this, you become naturally quite critical of what is being taught in schools. Does this really fulfill such a purpose? And we don't need to agree here on what education really originally meant, but I think we can agree that it widely has lost its original meaning, and it's mostly understood as in educate, meaning number 3, to persuade or condition to feel, believe, or act in a desired way. Yeah. Good. And with this, we jump already to one of the most famous culture critics of all times, Neil Postman. So Neil Postman wrote many books, but one book is The End of Education, Redefining the Value of School. And he did something very interesting. He did something very interesting because he believed that schools have a primary social function. And I think it's not so obvious, but he thinks that schools need to create a common ground in societies. And how should they do it? They should do it by communicating a unifying, purpose-giving narrative. And what he criticized, especially in American culture, was that the education system, this industrial education system, simply initiates children into the economy, which is, of course, the capitalist economy. So very critical. But apart from being critical, he also did something really interesting. He proposed 5 narratives as possible alternatives to the current capitalist narrative of industrial education systems. And I think the most important one, because it connects very well with our work, and Postman was active in the post Second World War era until the 1990s, I think. Is the spaceship Earth. So the notion of humans as stewards of the planet. You know that we did recently twice this a new map of the world, and we created together a flyer about Carl Sagan saying that we need this kind of understanding that we are stewards of the Earth. Sagan was a contemporary of Postman, and they seem to have agreed on this very much, even though one is an astrophysicist and the other one is a culture critic. So this is one of those narratives. There are others, but I think the main thing, what we should have as a takeaway here, is the purpose of education is to create a common ground in society through a shared narrative. And this relates very much to a very urgent discussion that we have in most Western societies, that we are having a divided society, a polarized society. I mean, I don't know if you're following this, but Ezra Klein, for example, in the United States, has recently published a book, Why We Are Polarized. And he criticizes that the American political system polarizes people almost in a kind of a civil war situation, because there are only two parties. But you can say the same thing about our European societies, no, where you have locals, you have migrants, you have people believing in different religions, you have people believing in different parties, and they quite often don't agree anymore, and there is a lack of common ground. So I think what Postman said here, that this is the central purpose of education, to create a common ground so that we can collaborate. This is super essential. You will not read this really in public curriculum. Good. So if we continue just on this idea, then you will see that in the most widely, I think, accepted and used idea of what does education mean, we think there is an institution and it instills knowledge into somebody. And on the other side, you have this rather positive label of learning. No, learning is autonomous, it's self-driven. You can decide which pace, you can decide what you want to learn, with whom you want to learn. And the two terms somehow seem to be almost contradictory. So education educates to be an obedient citizen. The result is nationalism. Education educates to be a loyal consumer. The result is waste. It's a biodiversity crisis. It's many other issues that we have, natural resource depletion. And learning somehow we think of as freedom, unfolding one's potential. But still, this kind of dichotomy, this opposition of those terms, it doesn't feel correct to me. I think we need to work on it, and I hope that we, at the end of the course, have a different understanding. All right, so there is, I would say, a famous but not widely read pedagogue, born in Brazil, Paulo Freire. He wrote a very important book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I think you see the main criticism that he makes in this cartoon. Does one of you want to volunteer to describe the cartoon? Come on, let's make this interactive. I don't want to do all the talking.
To me, I would say that the cartoon shows a system, let's say, where the priority is not on the outside, on nature, on getting to know our surroundings and environment, but to, from a very young age, start, let's say, with the more academic knowledge in a way. I mean, which is also important, but seems to be very, very focused and very intense with the children in this regard, and not um, also on the natural outdoor side of the world of the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe go a little bit more into detail. What else do you see here?
Out of the window, you can see the arts and PE, which is physical education, which are, at least in my school, for example, physical education was considered to be 2 hours of completely wasted time, basically. And art was more important in my school, but in general, yeah, it's considered, for example, for kids, just doodling around and doing something that is not really important. So yeah, you can see, I guess, the tree, art, sport, that is something not really necessary, and all the attention should be on tests and scores and what points you get on the tests.
I would say the arts are probably more seen more as a hobby than as a possible career or
Yes.
a future.
Yeah. If you say that you want to study something artistic, people usually ask you, okay, so you don't like to, I don't know, get money? I don't know, they make some jokes usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one more thing that is to be observed. It's a bit hidden.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it seems like the society expects you to be a conformist, and if you are like following your independent interests, not same as the main, like the bigger amount of people do, you consider to be left behind and like out of the group. And yeah, I think it's more about being like a conformist and like this, yeah, just that you should do as what other does, what other people do, and yeah, not like separate you from yourself from the group. If you
I think you really need to speak up, otherwise people will not understand anything here. All right, yeah. Yeah, so I think what we missed in the description here, it's all good what you described, that there is on the mountain, there are the letters science out there. Do you see it? Outside the window, it's science, no? Because when we talk nowadays about our education systems, it's actually these standardized tests and everything that happens in the classroom that is called STEM, no? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This is what is happening in the classroom. But there is science out there. No, there's science out there together with the arts and physical education. This is what I find so nice now. And of course, also the window is colorful. Everything inside is black and white and dull. Yeah, it's about streamlining. It's about, following the tests. How much do you think is this just a very cynical look at reality? And how much do you think is this actually good observation of reality?
I would say that for sure. I mean, considering some people I've met that were like very interested, for example, in the arts, I know that they have felt frustrated throughout most of their educational path, let's say, because of this. I think that's a pretty accurate representation of people, especially children, I think, with who have the talent and the passion and the interest in the arts, for example, and they don't really feel supported or they feel trapped in another type of curriculum, let's say, that they doesn't fit them as well as a different type of curriculum uh, could, could could fit, for example. In this regard, for example, I think it's pretty real because I've seen it. I've met people who with that artistic passion, let's say, who have felt trapped, which is more or less the feeling I get from this picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have two teenagers in school, and even though we put them in private schools, I see this happening. No, our daughter is in an IB curriculum school. She has 2 hours of PE a week, which is completely non-important. Also, nobody cares if they're not there, the students. Everything is focused on assessment and analysis of text. I mean, it's all theoretical and deprived of context to the real world. And it's all about standardized testing. IB, I think, is the international baccalaureate is one of the worst examples, I have to say. But also in every national and public system, you have PISA, the top standardized test, which is done everywhere at age 15. And you have national tests that also assess children in regard to their skills in usually native language, first foreign language, and mathematics. And of course, if you focus on these three subjects so strongly, everything else is neglected. So you will get one video as an assignment by Ken Robinson, who really also confirms that there is a pyramid, a ranking in our public curricula, where science and languages are on top, and then the things become less important with basically physical education, the arts, especially drama, dancing, being at the very bottom. No. So it's quite accurate. But to come back to Paulo Freire, we're gonna watch now a quick video in which we get explained the banking model of education. And the banking model of education is Paulo Freire's label for the industrial education model. So give me a second. Changing here to YouTube. So this is, of course, the problem that I did not think about. So now we can skip it. Yeah. So do you see my screen again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So then let's watch this together. I try to turn on the volume as much as possible.
Model of education is the term first point. Freire, in his influential book, of the Rest, it describes a teaching method where the teacher deposits information in the students who merely receive and then repeat. This treats students as containers, receptacles to be filled by the teacher, much like a bank receives and stores money. Origins of the banking model trace back to traditional educational systems, which often emphasize teacher-student relationship. In these systems, the teacher is seen as the sole professor of knowledge, and the educational process revolves around transferring this knowledge to students. This method is deeply rooted in many educational systems across the world, reflecting a widespread and long-standing approach to instruction. An example of the banking model in action can be seen in the traditional lecture-based classroom. The teacher presents a set of facts or information to students who are expected to take notes passively without engaging in meaningful dialogue or critical thinking. students' main responsibility is to memorize the information for tests and examinations, rather than to understand or challenge it. The core features of the banking model: strict teacher-student hierarchy, focus on passive learning, and thinking or interactive participation from students. In this model, knowledge is viewed as a gift bestowed by those who consider themselves knowledgeable upon those whom they consider to know nothing. Scope for questioning or exploring concepts is minimal, as the process is largely one way. There are several strengths to the banking model. For one, it can be an efficient way to transmit large amounts of information in a structured manner, especially in situations where basic foundational knowledge needs to be covered quickly. It also helps in standardizing education, ensuring that all students receive the same information, which can be important in preparatory courses or standardized exams. However, the model has been widely criticized for several reasons. Critics argue that it gives intellectual growth and critical thinking skills, which are essential in the modern world. By treating students as passive participants, it fails to engage them fully or to foster a questioning mindset. Additionally, the model does not accommodate different styles of learning, which can alienate or disadvantage students who do not learn well in passive environments. Furthermore, the thinking model is seen as oppressive. It diminishes students' individuality and their ability to contribute to their own learning, which can affect their motivation and overall educational experience. Freire himself advocated for a more interactive and problem-posing model of education, where students and teachers engage in dialogue, challenge prevailing ideas, work collaboratively towards understanding. While the banking model has been a traditional and efficient method of education, is seen as a model. Today, a shift towards more interactive, critical, student-centered learning environments to help students develop the skills necessary in today's complex, rapidly changing world.
People who forget what they read before they even finish the page. All right. It's not ADHD, it's an
Good. So let's share a few thoughts on the video. Banking model of education. Have you heard about that before?
No.
Yeah. Did you find it interesting? What's your idea about it? And why do you think it's related to the book that he wrote, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed?
Because I guess that the system for some type of students, or for many students for sure, it can be oppressive. For example, I recall some workshops, let's say, that we did at our school, teaching about the different types of intelligence, for example. And in general, I think that, I mean, students are very different. Every person is different. Some people are more intelligent in a way. Some people are also in a different way. And I think the system generally, it benefits only a certain type of student, and for the rest, or the ones that are not a full match for that system, are oppressed in that sense. And I think in that way it matches with the book.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Anything more? So I think it becomes apparent only then. I guess you have all been really fortunate. No, you have university degrees, and you have probably parents that were able to provide you with schooling that was appropriate. But Freire comes from like the slums in Brazil, in I think Sao Paulo, and he was really trying to find an education model that is especially for the economic and socially disadvantaged. And if you do not have access to good education, then it becomes even more apparent now why people from the lower classes are actually almost held back in those lower classes by not given access to actually explore the potential. So it is also a class critique, I would say, and he's a Marxist, definitely from his kind of philosophy background. But also from my experience teaching here in the public system in Austria, this is just the case now. And it's not so much that there the teacher has a lot of knowledge, but the children are kept in the institutions with getting the bare minimum of information when they graduate. So it's about the same kind of oppression. If you want to liberate people, you need to give them at least these competencies to ask critically about power structures. So there will be one assignment, especially in regard to the pedagogy of the oppressed, another such a short video explaining Freire's solution to the banking model of education. So you're going to watch it and then write a little bit about your thoughts and ideas on that video. Okay, then let's continue here again. Go to the next slide. So here we are. Another brilliant book, but rarely mentioned, is the Saber-tooth curriculum. So the Saber-tooth curriculum was written in 1939 by Harold Benjamin, a professor of education. And it was published under this name, the Saber-tooth curriculum. And again, I chose a caricature, a drawing to explain a little bit what this book is really about. So Benjamin introduces the readers in this book into a Stone Age society. In that Stone Age society, there is a school that teaches only 3 essential skills, and they are survival skills. 1 is catching fish with your hand. 2 is killing woolly horses with wooden clubs. And 3 is scaring off saber-toothed tigers with fire. That's what you see here in the picture now. And you see the line here, to learn tiger scaring, it is quite helpful to have a real tiger. What happens then in the course of the book is that the Stone Age curriculum works only as long as there is an ice age, until there is actually a climate condition where everything is as it was. So it was possible to catch fish, it was possible to have these woolly horses, and there were tigers. But then there is an ice age coming, and there is a climate change, and the glaciers of the mountains, they expand basically into the plains. So more and more glaciers, and then the tigers, they disappear. Instead, there are bears which arrive, but they are not anymore afraid of fire. So skill number 1 is useless. Then the rivers become very muddy because of the glaciers basically bringing also down a lot of debris from the mountains. And you cannot see anymore the fish, and they cannot be caught with bare hands. So skill number 2 is also useless. And then the woolly horses, sort of mammoth horses, they die out because the population has been decimated so strongly by hunting them down. So skill number 3 is also useless. But despite all these serious changes, the Stone Age schools, they stick to their curriculum and continue to teach what they have been teaching for ages. So what is the result? The result is that the Stone Age society collapses. Obviously, this is a brilliant anecdote written in 1939. Who would like to draw parallels to 2026?
For example, it's what you said about Austrian schools, that the curriculum didn't really change since you were at school now, and religion is still first subject, even though.
Again, speak up, please.
Yeah, I just memorized what you said about Austrian education system, that it didn't change since you were at school, which were quite a long time ago and now, and that first subjects are still like religion, even though there are now much more practical, much more like other issues that should be addressed, and it's not really implemented in the curriculum of the schools. Like it's oriented more on like the, yeah, I mean, basically it stays the same without very slowly implementing the new ideas.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we were talking about the industrial system of education, right? So I guess the idea is more or less that the curriculum, since well, I don't know exactly if it was, I mean, if it's since the Industrial Revolution or more or less the last, I don't know, maybe the last 100 years, it has stayed more or less similar. But for example, I don't know, we're facing an ecological crisis, and I don't feel like, for example, ecological knowledge is very prevalent in the curriculums nowadays. I'm not sure, of course, because I don't really know exactly the curriculums per se, but I have the feeling that it's not something that is being very implemented. I mean, it's being implemented as much as it should be for our situation and for the upcoming years, and I think it could be a result of this kind of situation.
Okay. Mary, do you have an idea?
We were discussing with Adri the other day about history education, and we were both saying that in our cases, we arrived to study until the Second World War and nothing, because we didn't have any more time to study history. So I think, at least in Italy, I know a lot of kids never studied the Cold War, never study anything of what happened afterwards. But I think it would be very important to learn also about contemporary history, if we can talk about it. I mean, something that happened like 5 years ago, for example, because it's very relevant now in the global political scenario. Like there are wars in Africa, for example, that no one is talking about now. No one. It would be very important, of course, to put the focus also on those.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it relates also what Liuba says. No, I mean, from the public education system, for example, crafts. Yeah, I'm taking a step by step. Crafts, they still do exactly what I did in school. I mean, it's like really nothing has changed. They do the same model step by step, slowly. I'm not complaining about poor tools and whatever. It just feels like, I mean, really, we still build wooden cars with 4 tires. You know, in other schools where parents have the means and schools are advanced, they do robotics. No, just as an example, history is a great example. I was so astonished getting in touch with China very late, actually, in my life, in my early 20s. I had learned nothing in history, nothing. And I see it now in my son. They need to learn in very detail the Austrian Habsburg monarchy. So history is in the end, it's a national narrative. History and politics as an educational curriculum is a national narrative where an existing power system is instilled into the heads of the students. And especially history and political education, as the subject is called in Austria, and I think also Germany, it is a clear mirror of that fact that it has not changed. So interdisciplinary learning, a lot of those things that could change this, it's not happening. No. Another example that I can give, because you say there is a lot of ecological stuff inside. In 7th grade geography books in Austria, economic growth is still one of the pillars of economics policy. Although it's very fact-based, and most of the scientific world knows it's not possible. We cannot do this. but it's taught to children. And what you said, Adri, of course, I think is true. We have more in the curriculum. I read the biology curriculum of different school levels and geography. We have a lot of these content in the curriculum, but people like David Sobel, you know, my favorite American teacher for place-based education, but also Richard Louv, same thing. What do they criticize? That we learn in school about nature and not in nature. So, and this is really very clear. You talk to biology teachers here, it has to do a lot also probably with liability considerations, but biology teachers don't go outdoors anymore with their students. So everything is very abstract. It's book knowledge, or what you also call secondary knowledge. To get primary knowledge, we go back to this other picture that we saw with the colored outdoors window, and there's the science, no, on the mountain. This is what is missing, yeah. And also a little bit looking into what we will explore also in the next session is, I think this is what indigenous learning was about. Because indigenous learning just happened in the landscapes, it happened outdoors. And it's also important to make this clear already today at day one. It's not about either or. We need to find the right balance. There is a lot of stuff that we need to learn indoors because it cannot be done outdoors. We have long winters here at least. No, we cannot be outdoors all the day or not at all. So it's good to also do stuff indoors, but it's about the right balance, and that is definitely missing. So right. There is now another video that I think we should watch together. You just need to give me a quick pause. So I will actually also pause the recording. I don't know. Okay, so we continue and we watch another video, but I think I shared the wrong screen. Let's try this again. Should be here. Desktop 2. So we're gonna watch now a video about changing education paradigms. And it's a RSA animation.
We come from reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first thing is economic. People are trying to work out how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent oil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of a political organization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which is if you work hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not. It's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. So people say we have to raise standards as if this is a breakthrough. But really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? I'm not saying that persuade me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic consequences of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, if you get educated by Jesuits, if you have money, public education paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that's a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many free kids from working class children to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence, that real intelligence consists in the capacity of a certain type of deductive reasoning and the knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education. There are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. Many people have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people,
just you, building your house. So now I can skip it. Go and turn it on again.
it's something this. This is a modern epidemic. It's as misplaced, and it's as infectious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescription for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualifying to say there's such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and pediatricians think there is such a thing. It's still a matter of debate. What I do know is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out. And on the same whimsical basis, and for the same reason, medical depression. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and forced their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from films and television screens. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? Boring stuff at school, for the most part. It seems to me not a coincidence. The incidence of ADHD has risen in parallel with the growth of the standardized system. And these kids are being given Ritalin and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. All is this? Attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. You think of it, the arts. I mean, I don't say this is the arts. I think it's also true of science and of math. I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of mentality currently. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. Anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children to education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interest in industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. You know, we put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? You know, why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? You know, it's the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. I mean, well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in small groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially bioconformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. It's about standardization. We've got to go in the opposite direction. That's what we mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study recently of divergent thinking. But divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential necessity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what every developer would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So I mean, let's test this. I mean, one kind of common example would be people might be asked to say, how many use cases think of for a paperclip? Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, would the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? Does it have to be a paperclip? Because we know it shouldn't. Well, they tested this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. It's in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond.
Sorry, but I don't have a paid account. So we continue.
If you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. The question to you is, what percentage of people tested, 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? And you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage of genius level? 80. 98%. It was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, age 8 to 10. They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend there. Now, this tells an interesting story, because you've got to imagine you're going the other way. You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up, a lot. But one of the most important things that I'm convinced is that by now they've become educated. You know, they spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. In outside schools, that's called collaboration. And this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. I have to think differently about human capacity to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is. Second, I have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups. Collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and the natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially a culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
So what is happening here? Do you see that? Why is it stop? Oh, okay. Wow. No, I didn't do anything to the audio. Okay, maybe it was the end. So I'm trying to play this again.
have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Second, you have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups. Collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning. And thirdly, it's actually about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats they occupy.
So it seems that this was it, right? Good. All right. So that was the industrial model of education. Now, what do you think about this? Any ideas that you want to share? We also want to keep it interactive. No? Otherwise, it's a lot of information. Whenever we share, we kind of also digest what we have just seen. We remember better. And we do collaboration. We help each other to understand what others perceive, which might be different of what you perceive yourself.
Yeah, I mean, for me, for example, I would say that one thing that really got my attention about this industrial system of education is, especially when they were talking about how we have the ability, I think it was the divergent thinking, right? Everyone has it, and then while we grow, say, we start to lose it, and basically they were checking it at different ages, and they noticed how it was deteriorating with the age. And I found that really, I mean, I guess I got what I got from the video. I guess it's as a consequence of the system that we have, right? Because I'm not sure about that. It's like a consequence, right, of the industrial system.
Yeah.
So, okay. That was very striking for me.
Okay. So what do the others think about this observation that Adri made?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've already heard about that experiment about the divergent thinking, and also I read an article years ago about the frightening amount of children in the US who are treated medically for presumed ADHD, but maybe they are just very active kids and they are just medicated to be calmer in class. And I find it very, very scary, honestly. It's so easy to just go to a doctor and get a prescription for this sort of medicines that are very heavy for the brain, of course.
Yeah.
And about what Adri said, yeah, of course, like I imagine if you ask the average kid, what can you do with paper clips? They would give you like the most crazy examples or ideas, like I would go to the moon just putting, I don't know. But when you are growing up, if you say something like that, teachers and maybe also your parents, they would say, come on, don't say silly things. Be for real, be serious. And then, sometimes you see when a kid is growing up that there is this light inside of him that slowly kind of turns off and they start being serious. They start giving you just the right answer, no? As it said, like there is one right answer, it's on the back, don't copy, don't talk about it with others. And so they start losing all this fantasy that is, I think, the most beautiful things in children. No, they have so many crazy ideas and questions, but they start losing them. So, and in a way, I think that you also think less about things, even serious things. Maybe you think, okay, there is one way to look at it, like the right way. But in some fields, I think it's actually extremely important to maintain the idea that there could be several ways of doing the same thing.
Yeah. the way I describe it is that because it's a good word in German from agriculture, the silo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have developed subjects that put every subject, every body of knowledge in a silo, and they are not connected to each other. That's also what Freire basically criticizes, because every silo is sort of guarded by a guild, a couple of people that have a very high education, that have invested a lot of money, and they of course don't want this silo to be taken over. So they keep basically knowledge bodies apart, also in academics, because it would be a complete change in power structures and everything if we suddenly would start to think laterally. This was Ed de Bono, lateral thinking, no? That you can actually connect things. And kids do it. They don't have any obstacles or inhibitions. Yeah. Okay. Good. Then we jump a little bit now already into what we can do with all of this. So let's go back to the slide deck. I hope this is the right one. I probably have to shift again. No, should be the right. No, I need to shift this place. Do you see what I see?
Mm-hmm.
So no, but I need to stop again. Because otherwise I'm recording the wrong thing here. So this should be like this. Should best of one. Okay. And makes it so much more complicated with using the technology. Good. Why does it not work? And share. Just one. Now. So, I don't know why you see this. You shouldn't be seeing this. You shouldn't be seeing this. Yeah, here we are. So education means toward end. I just wanted to connect 4 strings. I have this from, I think they called him the Socrates of cybernetics. He was a physicist, Heinz von Förster, and he wrote a book about systems. And in that book, he explains basically there are 4 avenues for transformation: religion, education, psychotherapy, and management. And if you look at the core, with all of those 4 avenues, you try to change people in a certain way. No, you instill skills and knowledge so that some goal can be achieved. I found this a very interesting observation. Because in the end, if you look at it positively, from this enlightenment period kind of starting point, then it is about improving the human being. But then we can ask, is this only about personal growth, like we, I think, sort of understand it nowadays mostly in the self-esteem movement and in a society where we are individuals? Or is it about collective growth? I just leave this with you as a very general observation, because education systems, in the sense of how enlightenment understood it, is of course not only about personal growth, it's about collective growth, that we as a society thrive, and not only certain individuals. All right. Then what I also want to add here is a very important observation that the father of MBA's Peter Drucker made. So he's kind of a management philosopher or a business philosopher. And he said that the fundamental task of management is and will always remain the same, to make people capable of joint performance through common goals, common values, the right structures, and the training and development they need to perform and respond to change. Now, please exchange the word management with education. And you will come to the conclusion that this is the same thing that Neil Postman said. No, Neil Postman also said, it's about creating a common ground that enables people and creating a common ground through a narrative, no, that it enables people to do something purposeful. I find this highly enlightening, because if you look at management in this way, no, it's just education for adults in a way. Well, and then we can, of course, ask ourselves, and this relates to the saber-toothed curriculum, what is management? And again, exchange it with education in the Anthropocene. No? It's making people with different skills and knowledge capable of responding to climate change by whatever, setting goals. But essentially, management and education's social function is, in this sense, securing survival. It's very straightforward. And again, more anthropological perspective on what could be then the far goal of education. In the course of history, we have developed different concepts of Homo, of our own species. Carl Linnaeus, the Swedish botanist, coined in the 18th century the term Homo sapiens. It's our evolutionary biological definition. In the 19th century, people like John Stuart Mill, an economist, coined the term Homo economicus, obtain the highest possible well-being for myself. It's very egocentric now. Homo ludens, generating culture through play. This term was coined in the 20th century by the Dutch historian Johan Huntinger, who criticized actually the Nazis, the German Nazis. And Homo faber was coined by Hannah Arendt in the 20th century, German-American philosopher. It is controlling the environment through tools. And then Homo deus, I think, can be mostly subscribed to the historian Yuval Harari as a type of being that thinks it can be God, and in that role create and destroy as it pleases. Yeah, and in the end, now we need to ask ourselves what kind of Homo education should shape. So we continue now actually into sort of wrapping up this first session. We need to define the problem space, also why Green Steps exists as an organization. And it's actually just two words. It's hippocampus atrophy. And we start this part again with a quote by Ken Robinson, who connected the natural resource crisis, biodiversity crisis, with a crisis in human resources in education. He deeply thinks that the two are connected. And I put here two charts next to each other, which is not scientifically correct, but I think it's a parallel that we can observe now. And he made also an allusion to that in his talk, Ken Robinson. On the left side, we have a chart that shows or visualizes this famous 30-year longitudinal study by a German biologist. It was first published in 2017, who noticed that 2/3 of the insect biomass in Germany has vanished in only 30 years. So there's a massive decline in insect biomass, which we know is essential for this entire system to continue. And on the other hand, we have this decline in divergent thinking. Well, at least Ken Robinson says it needs to be related with how we educate children, because it happens during education when we are streamlined to just give one answer to one problem. So I think we need to bring this into, we need to bring it down to the ground, and we need to ask ourselves how we need to deal with natural resources. And currently we know that if you manage land badly, then it becomes desertified, it becomes wasteland. If you manage land properly, if you are active in ecosystem restoration, you can revert climate change, and you can create thriving landscapes. So this is what is, I think, an underlying narrative and an objective that should be immanent to education. And here again, if you just teach about it in schools, then it's not enough. I think children at very young age can already participate in the practice. When we developed this course in the first 3 settings, and then also during the Hupu Summit, we're thinking a little bit more about the causes and effects of biodiversity loss now. And you see that the influences are human population growth, increasing consumption, reduced resource efficiency. It leads to habitat loss, invasive species, overexploitation, pollution, and climate change, and global warming. So this is one fact. And what is important here, again, I think it's a silo, because people that practice anything related to conservation usually look at this. This is their system that they look at. But what they don't look at is how this relates to us, to the human species. We again have a loss of divergent thinking, or let's call it a creativity loss in the last instant, the elimination of divergent thinking capacity, and the production of obedient citizens and loyal customers. What are the influences? Greed, ignorance, and apathy. I will come to this in a second. What do these values lead to? They lead to capitalism, the industrial education system. Quite often we have a technology lock-in, so we design technology in a way that it actually supports capitalism and industrial education. We have globalization, we have urbanization. And the result is, of course, then also less human biodiversity. We quite rarely look at ourselves as also being a life form that is highly diverse. And if we have less human biodiversity, I think it automatically also leads to less natural biodiversity. Just think again about these different types of Homo. If everybody is educated nowadays into a Homo economicus, well, naturally, this also shapes the world, right? And this points at a very, very important role that education could play. I think I mentioned this before here in this group, but Gus Speth, he is actually an environmental lawyer, but he was also the US advisor on climate change and a teacher at Yale. And he thought for a very long time that the problems that need to be addressed are biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. But then he realized it's actually about the morals, the values behind that, because they are just consequences of selfishness, greed, and apathy. And it is very difficult, I think, for scientists to change this. You need a cultural transformation. And where is culture shaped? Well, of course, in education. This is where culture is shaped. So what we do now is that we look at the 5 dimensions of education. If you look at any education system, then usually you have a content. What is being taught? You have resources, which is in itself already very interesting. How much money do governments allocate to primary education, secondary education, tertiary education, and how much do they allocate to kindergartens, for example? This makes a huge difference. Then the time. Do we teach in very short lessons? Do we teach all day long? Do we teach project-based? Do we teach subject-based? Do we teach in line? And I would say even in atonement with nature and natural cycles? Or are we completely isolated from them? If I look at the industrial education system here, where we have actually a strong difference between winter and summer, it is evident that it is very industrial, because even in winter, when it's still pitch dark, children need to get up very early, like they go to work. Nobody is aligned with natural cycles. I think that would be a very important feature of an alternative to industrial education. Then the attitude, we mentioned that I think already a little bit. Is the instruction competitive? Standardized testing is usually always competitive, or is it collaborative? And then what we will focus very much on in the rest of the course is space, because space really is a blind spot in industrial education. And this is what we have visualized also in this graph. So when we ask ourselves where students and teachers spend their time in a typical national industrial education system, then you could look at it in zones. Red zone here is the school building, it's indoors. And you would come to the conclusion by observing. You could even track this. I always wanted to do that, like putting trackers on students in a school and teachers. You spend 90% plus, even more, probably 98% plus in a school year indoors. Then zone 1 would be school garden, which is already outdoors. It's in many schools not used apart from PE classes. And then you have zone 2, the municipality, the neighborhood of the school, zone 3, the region beyond the hometown. And so you could extend this further and further. But you see 4 eras, and these eras actually are forces that push students and faculty, students and teachers into zone 0. It's usually the educational administration, the ministry, the state education offices, the principal. A driving force behind this is quite often liability of teachers. Then we have the school owner, who usually is in charge of running the buildings, and who does not invest or wants to invest into more than just maintaining the building. It's the parents, which are worried. We don't have any more large families with 5, 6, 7 children. We have mostly only single children. And so parents are worried a lot. They want to know where the children are, naturally speaking. And the safest place is of course, indoors. And then fourth, and I think this is underestimated, it's technology. All the technology that is used in schools is designed for the classroom. It's not designed for the outdoors. Good. There are resulting pain points. The pain points are achievement gaps, especially if you look into the socioeconomic differences in our society. So it's poorer students with parents that don't have time or means to really support their children in learning or pick an appropriate school. They usually lag behind tremendously. We have studies here in Austria about language acquisition, that there is up to 3 years of difference when you graduate from compulsory schooling in language capability. We have screen addiction because children are just very, very bored. And important again for our work here is nature alienation, because we are just simply indoors. And this nature alienation could be also called a golden jail paradox, because we actually pay a very high price for a comfortable life indoors. And there are a lot of side effects, the cost, which extends from obesity, lower grades, mental disorders, even to that extent, which also Ken Robinson mentions in another talk, that a lot of people, and surveys say it's 7 to 8 out of 10, don't find the job in their life that makes them happy or at least satisfied. So what's the purpose of education if not giving people a path towards a career where they have enjoyment or at least satisfaction? I think this is also something very important to achieve. So, and then there is a neurological background to this, which we already touched a little bit. There is quite a lot of science, and Mary already shared with you a couple of papers on this, that the hippocampus, and we need to be here also clear, modern brain science tells us quite clearly that there is not one region being in charge of everything. We talk about clusters and brain regions, but the hippocampus, and there's a lot of research on this, seems to be an integral area for space and memory. It's part of the limbic system. It plays a vital role in learning, memory encoding, memory consolidation, and spatial navigation. And I think we need to kind of really put this together. There is, like in science fiction movies, a space-time continuum. No, the question is, how can we activate the hippocampus? And it seems quite clear that the same brain centers that we need for memory are also related to movement. So the more we move, better we can also memorize. Of course, not everybody. There are a number of students, Adri, you talked about different types of intelligence. There are people that are completely abstract learners or have a photographic memory that maybe don't need that. But for the majority of people, movement is important. And there is a psychology textbook example of London cab drivers. It was, I think, one of those tests that really confirmed that the hippocampus is a super important brain area. Cab drivers have a very enlarged hippocampus, especially when they don't use a navigation system in cities like London, where they need to memorize a lot of different roads. And it shows that there is neuroplasticity at work. This is a brain region that can be trained, and it enlarges. Of course, here it is really just trained on spatial navigation, but in education, it should be trained and used to support all different things of learning. And here we need to know as a takeaway that the result of repeated and self-guided space exploration is leads to increased memory function and intellectual capability. So being outdoors alone or in groups helps a lot. There is the so-called cognitive map theory. I'm not going to go into this here, but I think should be something that you also look into. We need to make conclusions here at this point because we also have one more small chapter of Green Steps Principles. Conclusions are that students should be given access to the developmentally and psychologically appropriate space to increase learning success and improve mental health. Students should spend at least 1/3 of their lesson time outside the school building. 1/3, if you think about it, it's not that much, you know. But we are talking currently about maybe 2%. Teachers and principals should strive to achieve and implement this proportion. The learning space must be opened up and developed beyond the school building. There are a lot of efforts on the way, but it's not happening fast enough, and it's also not really structured, and there is no IT solution. This requires preparation of the school environment by teachers and an interdisciplinary curriculum. Yeah, and of course, you need to train the teachers. You need to train the teachers. Good. This is it for this part. I would say we make a quick break again after we collect again our thoughts about what we discussed now, and then we move into the third part. So I know there was a lot of information, but I also made it quick because we talked about it already a little bit. Anything that is on top of your mind that you want to share? Hmm? Okay, let's at least connect the dots. No, we were talking about education systems. No, the idea is that we wrap up everything and kind of make it more accessible, because this is a lot of information. We're talking about education systems. We're talking about the banking model of education. We're talking about the industrial education system. No, and I think we all agree that this has to change. No, it has to change because we would like to have education that empowers everybody, empowers all different kinds of intelligences, but we also need a different type of education to actually come to terms with the problems that we have nowadays, and we obviously still don't do. So question again, how do you think does this connect to the neurological background that has been mentioned here? That the current industrial model of education causes this hippocampus atrophy.
Just the fact that students are lacking practical experience and they're just learning theoretical knowledge, and it's very limited.
Yeah, please speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
okay, so theoretical knowledge, okay, can lead to boredom, no?
Yeah, and
can lead to, I don't know, less divergent thinking.
Yeah, like a lack of stimuli.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also like big part of
connected to this is the neuromarker theory. No, the neuromarker theory says if you have neuromarkers in different dimensions, not only visual, you also memorize things better. But what about emotions? No, it's also about that. No, I mean you need to build up emotions and be in touch with the outdoors. Why should I engage in climate change? I'm happy in the mall. Well, why should I protect anything? I'm happy with my computer game.
I think it's also practical experience creates more value because you get more involved in what you experience, not just in theory, abstractly, but yeah, in real life.
Yeah. So he will move actually into a completely different argument. It's about purpose. Yeah. So Viktor Frankl, whom I like very much, he coined logotherapy. And he said everything needs to have a purpose. This is our real human driving force. It's not instincts, like Freud said, no, the libido. It's not only that we are power driven. Yes, a lot of people are power driven, but actually, what really drives us and what makes us human is purpose. Well, I mean, I hear from my kids, and I know from my own school time, I hardly ever feel purpose. Doing something that is purposeful. That's also not so easy in school, right? Anything else? Or are you already getting tired of it? Do we need another 15 minutes? Or are you still thinking? We can also do a little kind of, we can do a complete wrap up after the Green Steps principles, which are sort of derived on the basis of this. Okay, so then let's have a quick break again, 5 minutes. Press here. All right, so then let's move into the last part of day one or week one. And I show you first a video, which we did quite a long time ago, but supposed to be a signature video of Green Steps. And it summarizes the Green Steps principles, which we will look into afterwards. So I hope this is it. This is not, this is it. You see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I enlarge and press play. This doesn't move. Try again. Okay, that was our 2019 signature movie where we basically collected all the Green Steps principles, which are still based on what you heard before. This idea that learning needs to be transformed. It's of course an ideal, but we look into the principles now a little bit more into detail. Do you like the video? Uh-huh. Okay. I think John has a gift for selecting good music and doing such videos. Yeah. So, do you see my slide deck?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, there are a couple of trends in the 20th and the 21st century that we have already partly observed, and we just put them down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 words. So there is definitely nationalism that has emerged in the 19th century and continues to be very strong. I think after COVID and the global financial crisis, even more so. The last meeting in Davos was a celebration of nationalism, I would say. Make Europe great again, make America great again, made in China, and so on and so forth. So that's definitely a trend. We have urbanization as a trend. We actually watched together a great movie, no? The Human Scale. We have consumption as a trend. We have digitalization as a trend. In regard to education systems, there is definitely a feminization on the way. In kindergarten setting, you have almost only kindergarten teachers that are females. Of course, has to do with the salary, but I think not only. Primary schools, 98% women. And secondary schools, I think still 80% plus. Even in tertiary education, you have nowadays already more women teach than men. So this tells us something. Definitely it's not any more balanced. And another trend is individualism in Western societies, at least, which has led to an epidemic of depression. According to positive psychologists like Martin Seligman, who really looked into this subject a lot. So what are principles? This is a picture of Bill Mollison, one of the 2 founding fathers of permaculture. And he said principles are a basic truth, a rule of conduct, a way to proceed. But it's not a law or something that has to be followed. It's also not very precise. It's an idea that has evolved out of observing systems, and it's a guideline that you can follow. So this is also how we understand these principles. And as opposed to nationalism, we preach globalism because we have only one spaceship Earth, and the nation states that exist probably cannot continue to exist if we really want to have a more or a less resource intensive way, create less waste, and so on and so forth on the planet. And of course, nationalism impacts education tremendously. We also think that retro-suburbia, or a re-evaluation of the countryside, is important. If we have countries like Australia or Japan, where 90% plus, actually also Italy, also highly urbanized, of people live in cities, and you have completely empty countrysides where you actually need people as stewards, then there is something to be done about the countryside. Then instead of consumption, we should move at least partially where it is joyful and where it is meaningful into production. to produce things on your own can be a very pleasant process. Then manual work instead of digital work. Whatever that manual work takes in shape should be cherished. Gender balance is, I think, in education super important, but in order to make education attractive for men, the content and the way things are being taught need to change quite a bit. And then communitarianism as opposed, or communities as opposed to individualism is definitely also a principle. So I want to keep it short, but I share with you the slides afterwards. And in regard to all these principles, there are a couple of thoughts.